Case study number one, it's the making of any good B2B drama. It involves a very large buying committee and very long sales cycles, things that are dreaded by some marketers out there. But anyway,
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear about this. So take it away.
Yeah. So is quick background. The primarily I work with companies that are selling, really exclusively B2B. These are technology sales. They typically have very long sales cycles. And when I say long, for context, everybody's definition can be different. But 6 months would be blazing fast. I mean, that would be, like unheard of, frankly. A lot of sales cycles can be 12 months to even as long as 24 months. Now, the deal sizes are huge. So, when you get one over the finish line, it can easily be a high six-figure, even seven-figure annual reoccurring, type engagement. So that creates a lot of challenges though, because, navigating, you can imagine the stakeholder count gets pretty high when you're talking deal sizes that large. You have product involved, you have engineering involved, you certainly have finance, you have executive sponsors. There's a lot of people sitting around the table, and keeping everything on track, over 12 to 18, even 24 months is the challenge.
Yeah. So, all right, take us through that beginning of the journey for this company and give us some context about like their business.
Yeah. So the business is software, and it's in a very niche, but very critical, and actually it turns out very visible area of video. If you've watched streaming service like, Amazon Prime or Netflix or, Disney Plus or Max, the new HBO service, basically anybody who's streaming video, there's a critical component that's called video encoding. And all that is you take this large video file, you make it smaller, but retain the quality so that then you can watch it on your TV, your iPhone, your whatever device you're on. Now, you can imagine that the integration complexity there is pretty deep. So what ends up happening is that a sales process, there's some of the normal things that you could imagine, like, well, certainly they probably want to see, does it produce good quality? Does it meet some very specific technical requirements? And those hurdles can be cleared, pretty quickly. But it turns out that there is a very long evaluation process. They not only have to assess just the product, does it do what you say it does? Does it work in their environment? But then they often have to integrate it and do,
Yep.
what's typically called a proof of concept or something that would look like a POC. So this is the challenge, because what ends up happening in this type of a sales cycle is that the business sponsor, or you may think of it as the budget holder, even though it is true, it would be their name that is on the PO. And yes, they have the authority to certainly say, no, we're not going to spend the money, or we're not going to spend the money on solution A, but we're going to go with solution B. But because of the technical complexity, very, very often the old concept, the typical B2B sales concept that I need to get to the buyer, I just need to get to the authority. And that's, the CFO or the CTO or the highest ranking executive. And that's how we're going to win this deal. It doesn't apply. And in fact, generally speaking, it can be, now I'm saying this by rank only, not by importance, but it can be the lowest ranking member on the buying committee who doesn't have the authority to say yes, but 100% can say no. And they will override the senior executive every single time. It's a huge challenge though, because quite often this person is not visible in the initial vendor meetings. In fact, quite often the challenge is to figure out, okay, who is that person in the account and how do we get to them?
Yeah. Interesting. So
Yeah.
is that by design? Do these companies, are they hiding this unofficial
Ooh,
decision
good
maker,
question.
or is it no, they're a behind the
Yeah.
scenes tech person, they don't need to be in meetings?
Yeah. And you know what, Steve, that's a great question. I would say that it's different for, culturally in some companies. There are some companies where it's by strategy. And in fact, you go hunting for these individuals, and it's very clear that they are hidden on purpose. You cannot find them.
Yep.
Others, it's just purely in nature. And I would say this is more often the case. It's a nature that, often we're dealing, these are PhDs, these are academics, these are people who are certainly capable and used to talking to vendors, but it's a different role in the organization.
Yep.
So yeah, that's where the complexity, comes in.
So how do you get to that person, even though you may not see them?
Yeah.
What are you just saying? We know how they think, therefore all of our content and documentation will be presented in a friendly way. How does that work?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. So, this case study is all about really I would call it the evolution of the way that marketing or marketing ideology worked or used to work, 7, 8, 10 years ago and the way it works today. So, the idea was, oh, well, this is why we have a product, previously, this is why we have a product marketing team. The product marketing team are sort of one part engineers, one part product people, and one part marketers. They know how to speak the language. Sometimes, you'd hear, that they know how to speak the geek talk, it often be.
Yep.
Although there's an element of that where clearly if you're going to talk to somebody who lives in an incredibly academic environment, they're an engineer, you do want to tailor how you speak to them to their kind of the language. Again, I put that in air quotes, but the language that they would relate to. But it's different than that. And so what the approach now is that, and this is the case study, is that we moved really to solve this dilemma of continuing to come up against buying processes where you would get 50, 60, 70% of the way down the road and then never quite be able to get it closed. And what was the holdup? What was the holdup? And always it came down to suddenly a name popped up, and well, wait a second, who's this person? We've never talked to this person. You'd go look him up and you'd say, oh, well, this is a principal engineer. And they have this certain, description. You're like, well, yeah, I can understand why the name popped up, but now we think we've closed this. And suddenly this person's coming back and asking a whole raft of questions that we should have addressed earlier. So that caused us to really take a radical rethink of how we market. For example, do they care about our brand? And you know what? Sadly, they don't. Does not matter that I've got killer swag that I'm giving out an event. Do they care that I've got the big booth front
That could
and
be
center?
a bad thing. That means
Yeah.
swag dollars not put into the product.
Yeah, 100%. Steve, you're bang on. Now, that doesn't necessarily always get verbalized, but, I have a lot of stories where you would hear like people go, oh, geez, company A over here, it'd sure be nice if they spent that big fancy booth budget on making their product better,
Yep.
So our normal marketing tactics, like we're just really going to invest in our brand so that when people see our logo, they're going to feel confident, they're going to feel safe, they're going to, that this is a quality product. This person doesn't care about that. This person is not necessarily trolling all of the usual, and I don't mean that in the negative sense. Like troll is probably the wrong word, but they're not on some of the maybe social platforms. They're not in some of the normal places where it's like, yeah, but we're running this great ad campaign. We've got this really cool thing we're doing here. They're not there. Okay. So where are they? Well, this is what's super interesting is that they are self-organizing, and they're self-organizing around communities. And you might say, well, what, like Facebook groups? No, maybe, but set aside, whether it's a LinkedIn group or it's a Facebook group or whether it's just a meetup that they go to once a month of, engineers that are working in the same space that just hang out, drink beer and talk shop. There's a lot of ways this can look, but that is where a lot of the information transfer is happening. And so the big unlock was in 2018 when we had been at this for a couple years and enjoyed some success. There's some video streaming services that you probably and many of the listeners have subscriptions to that utilized and still utilize today our software. And so had success, but we also had enough of these deals that didn't close, where these experts were like, how do we get to them? What do we do? And so we started thinking about, what if we started hosting a party? Okay. And the idea is it's not a sales event, not at all, because they would bristle at that. But you know what? Everybody likes a good party. everybody's interested in something. What if we just create a forum for information to be transferred, for people to hang out for, and this is the community aspect. You know what? We're going to draw these people in. We're going to begin to meet them. We're going to learn who they are. They're going to get to know us. And then if at some point we're engaged in a sales process, it's going to be a lot easier to, to push through. So we chose a podcast as the forum to do that. And, some might be like, wow, community. And all of a sudden you're jumping to a podcast. I don't think of podcasts as communities, but let me tell you, in my experience, they are incredible community builders because it gives someone an asynchronous way to interact with you as a person, interact with the company, get a sense of the company, and none of it in a sales way. So we started a podcast called The Video Insiders, and it really was just a hosted series of conversations that were with interesting people doing things in the video industry. We would even talk to competitors. And that might be a little bit of a mind blown for some people. The first time that I presented this to my CEO, who I reported to and worked for, I said, now there's a wrinkle here. And he loved podcasts. So it's like, I didn't have to convince him like the value. But I said, there's one wrinkle. I said, the wrinkle is that we're not going to be dumb about it. We're not just going to invite our competitors on to come take shots at us. But you know what? There's enough co-opetition. And we know in some cases that there are other technologies and other competitive solutions that are being reviewed. So why not be the host of the party? Like, hey, let's invite them on. Let's have a conversation. And it worked like gangbusters. Really, really, really super effective.
Yeah, I have really liked that approach. I mean, even with my own podcast, right? I've had other content marketing agency leaders or owners. And when I always ask myself, should I do this? This is a threat to my company. I really just say, Steve, get over it. Be true to the podcast. Like, I'm not doing sales pitches. And I think your point is very valid. It's better to be the host of the party as opposed to like making it such an invite exclusive thing that not everyone is going to, see it that way.
That's right. And what's great about doing that too is that you break down the natural you push through, I guess, is maybe a better way to think about it. Push through but he's a marketer, or this is a marketing thing, or, but it's sponsored by this company. Surely they just want to sell to me, and look, we all feel that on some level. And I debate with some people say, well, engineers feel it even more. I don't really think that's true because, especially I work largely in Silicon Valley, and, the same engineer who will sit there and say, I hate marketing, I hate marketers, will go out and get in their brand new fancy whiz-bang car that clearly was marketed to them that they bought, some kind, let's see, how did this work? But the point is that by just facilitating just conversation, like, hey, we're all here to grow the industry. We're here, to really improve your life, bring value to your life meaning, you as an individual working for a company, in this space, doing your job and trying to make your company better. The rewards come back. So maybe I should share with you some of the more tangible outcomes.
Yeah, let's do it. What do we got? What were the outcomes?
Yeah. Because it's easy to say, hey, it worked like gangbusters, but okay, what does that mean, Mark? So one of the challenges with a podcast is that even as you grow your downloads, your listenership, your audience, first of all, for a lot of us, the niches and our subject areas are probably pretty small. And so I'm going to give one number that may be a little bit shocking, but I'm doing this on purpose because I think there's this feeling of like, oh, but if I don't get to 5,000 downloads, a week or within some, then it's a failure. On average, we only got 500 downloads in the first 7 days of an episode. Some people might be like, geez, what's the point? Now, bear in mind, this is going to be contextual to your TAM, and I don't even mean the economic TAM. I mean, just, if there are in the whole world 1,000 companies, or even let's say 5,000 companies that really would be in your ICP, 500 is 10%, right? That's pretty good coverage if you're reaching 10% every week,
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so just for comparison, but my point in, first of all, sharing that is that it is absolutely about who is listening, not the absolute numbers. And I've said it, if there were 100 of the right people, we would have viewed it as a success. So we got to 500. Now, here's the challenge though, is that you don't have a way to really directly engage them, because we also chose not to be really heavy-handed with trying to get email addresses. And so I said, this is great. And we're getting really tremendous anecdotal feedback. Our sales team and going to meetings, it just became automatic. You'd go into the first meeting and somebody in the room, on the customer or the prospect
Yep.
side would say, we love your podcast. I mean, it just became automatic. Like, it was weird if it didn't happen. So we knew people were listening. So what we decided to do was build a LinkedIn group. And we called it, and it's still, it's very active today. And in fact, today there's 3,200 people who have chosen to join. They've requested to join. It's very selective. I don't have it open. I probably reject 3 out of 5 who request to join, because I just simply
Yep.
look and it's like, they're not even in the industry, or they're not, or
Yep.
it's just not a good fit. The point is, this isn't just a vanity group. Now, what does this give us? What it gives us now is a way to message via LinkedIn to these professionals who are the movers and shakers in the streaming video industry. So super valuable. The second tangible outcome is that these things are a little tough to quantify. And I even, we could model higher improvement in this area, but our sales cycle time shrunk by 20%. 20%. Now, when you're talking about a 12-month, maybe an 18-month
Yeah.
sales cycle, like
It's huge.
20% is huge. Why is that? Well, because of this affinity. Rather than having to take 1 to 3 meetings for them to, it's almost like kind of feel you out as the vendor, like, well, are you
Yep.
legit? And who are you? They already came in like, hey, we know, like, and trust, going back to
Yep.
that, these guys.
Yep.
Okay, number 2. Number 3 was that we had at least, and again, these are kind of conservative, but at least a 3x increase in what I considered like our organic distribution of content. And so what does that mean? Well, first of all, we now had a podcast episode that we would cut up and, repurpose. And we just got this, all of a sudden, just this boost, like literally a 3x over our organic content distribution. That's huge, because everybody should be focused on that.
Yep.
How can I,
Yep.
how can I get it out there? And then there was absolutely a direct correlation to a revenue increase as a result of a couple factors. One being, sales cycles are shortening. So obviously we have more revenue that's closing in a shorter period. That gave us a very, very nice boost. But generally, just an overall lift in terms of just the market saying, wow, this company is everywhere. I can remember, Steve, one time being at a major trade show, and somebody approached me who I know from the industry. The first thing that he commented was, Mark, congratulations, you guys are everywhere. Now, the funny thing is,
Yes.
still, we're a startup, right? We don't have massive marketing budgets. We were not burning a ton of cash. It's not because the logo was splattered everywhere. It's
Yep.
because of the perception of, it's the podcast and other things, but it largely was driven by the podcast. So,
I want to touch on something you said, is the whole know, like, and trust factor. I've been podcasting for 4 or 5 months now, and I've done video series in my business for 26 characters. It is rewarding as a marketer when someone comes to you, raises their hand, and says, no, let me just give you the context. I've already watched X, Y, and Z. I know this. And it is so much more interesting to sell to those people.
That's
because you
right.
don't sell. This truly
That's
is,
right.
all right, they are a buyer. And I just say, you tell me, how can I help? What do you need?
That's right.
And it's amazing how the power of, whether it's podcasting or video marketing.
Yeah.
And I think so much of it really is just it's not written.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When you hear people talk, when you hear them tell a story, I would imagine on this podcast, within 5 seconds, people are judging us. Are these people smart? Do they know what they're talking about?
That's right.
And I could write a white paper, and at the end of that white paper, you'd still say, well, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
There were some interesting things in this white paper, but anyone could write it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when it's from a human with a talking head, it's all together. You know,
Yeah.
it makes sense to people.
100%. Yeah.